We are looking forward to the prospects of increased research funding in this area. There was a very significant announcement with the US recently on funding of solar research jointly between the two countries, and the Australia Solar Institute is ramping up, and we look forward to seeing the fruits of that research over the coming years as well.
I think, sadly, it's probably not so bright as it should be. Australia seems to be suffering from a light version of the resource curse, where you're dedicated, your energy systems, your regulatory systems, your financial systems are dedicated towards promoting uranium and coal. And I think that creates a lot of dangerous opportunities that constrain the government's ability to move out of the path, right, of fossil fuels. And unfortunately, I think in the past year you've seen a lot of negative things in Australia, with New South Wales cancelling their feed-in tariff scheme with less than 12 hours notice, with uncertainty about what Australia is going to do with climate change, with increased subsidies for coal, at least for coal plants and for coal transport, that make it shaky, right? And I think that if you're going to have a more solid future, then unfortunately you probably have to start making some pretty big changes pretty quickly.
At the moment we're reliant on a number of regions that have burnt coal, and they're not only contributing to wider climate change, which is very serious, but local pollution in terms of, you know, mercury, biggest releases of mercury into the Australian environment, lots of poisonous gases up the smokestacks, and we don't need that now today in the 21st century, because we've got renewables, we've got baseload renewables, we've got renewables that you can mesh together and deliver the power of a modern economy.
Well, I hope, whether it's by imitation of what's going on overseas or by a great understanding in the government, that people will start to put in systematic measures to support the solar industry, which do not go up and down. But right now we have very, very good technologies. As I say in my talk tonight, we have existing technologies that can power very large countries like China and India and the United States, and not to mention Australia. So the solutions are increasingly there. It's just the political will to get on and do what some countries have already done, put in systematic measures.
People often think that solar photovoltaic electricity or solar thermal electricity is not reliable. But this is kind of tricky because there are many different types of reliability, and we've built conventional power systems to handle the incredible unreliability of fossil fuel units. Fossil fuel units take a coal plant, rely on fuel that has to be mined, transported, combusted, it produces waste streams, and it's a very complicated process of boiling water, right, which is all you're really doing to make electricity. A solar panel does all of that within one little panel. It's a photon that hits it and produces an electron, right? So you don't have to combust fuel, you don't have to deal with shortages of fuel other than when it rains, but even then, usually solar insulation is enough to have minimal, your solar panel will still operate. And the technical reliability of a solar photovoltaic panel is about 97–98% of the time, whereas the reliability for a coal plant is just 85%. And the reliability for a natural gas plant is about 67%, right? So if you're just looking at apples and apples, how reliable is the piece of technology? Solar is many times more reliable than your typical coal plant because it's much simpler, it's much beautiful, it's much more elegant, it's much closer to the point of consumption.
So I think that you could say this about any country, that as Australia goes, so goes the world. You know, Australia has a huge solar resource. It has an intellectual base here to be able to support it, and it's going to work here, it's going to work in the United States, and it's going to work all around the world. Right now I have a project, believe it or not, in Iraq, rebuilding the electrical infrastructure. There's a place that you don't talk about grid parity because there is no grid, so that even in places like this that have been war-torn and everything, are the ideal places for this technology. So it's not only the advanced world, it's the advancing world as well.